Hey, what's up everyone? So I've been testing the Charge 5 since it came out for about 2 months now, and the Luxe also intermittently in that time frame. No, I don't wear them at the same time, but just for the purposes of this video. And I've also been using the Inspire 2 for about the past year and a half. So I just wanted to give you guys a comprehensive kind of background on some nitpicks of each one, what might be best for you, and my personal experience using them. The Inspire 2 is pretty much no frills activity tracker. It's really light, coming in significantly lighter than the other two because it's made of all plastic. And it is pretty much just a step tracker with heart rate tracking, good for tracking your sleep, measuring your stats. It doesn't have the level of advancedness of the Charge 5 or the Luxe in terms of the sensors, but at a fraction of the price, I think it still holds a pretty good place in the market and is something I can wholeheartedly recommend. I've been using this for a long time, been really happy with it, and the standout feature is by far the battery life. At 10 days to 12 days, which I've gotten sometimes, it pretty much never warrants me needing to take a charger on a trip or worry about charging it. It's like the Energizer Bunny of the three. The price can be pretty heavily discounted on this sometimes, so check the links below. I've seen it as low as 50, and it retails for a little around 100. So yeah, if you just want a basic tracker, I think this is probably your best option. The Luxe, which is the next one up, gives kind of, a few more features in terms of like the screen brightness, the OLED, the premium feel, which is, stainless steel. And then you get a few more sensors, but if you don't really use those sensors, then the Inspire 2 is probably a better option for you. The Luxe also has half the battery life of this. Now the Charge gets closer in terms of battery life, but it also has a host more features. So I don't think anyone that's looking at a Charge 5 is really looking at an Inspire 2. If you're probably either looking between the Luxe and the Inspire 2 or between the Luxe and the Charge 5. One quick thing I want to mention is the actual bands. Some people can kind of be allergic to silicone. Like my sister had a pretty bad reaction on her arm. So, she tried switching arms and that helped a little bit. But if you have a allergic reaction to it, they do have some wear and care tips that they put in the app there. So I definitely recommend using those if you have any issues with it. Just remember that you can also completely change the straps out and get a different material. So your mileage may vary, but if that is an issue that's affecting you, then do please look into that. So first I want to start by talking about the physical aspects of the two devices. Now the Charge 5 is obviously a little wider, a little bit bigger. At the same time, it does have a much bigger screen. If you measure it, it's only 0.1 inches bigger, but in reality, when you're looking at the two, it feels like it's almost twice as big. It's a pretty noticeable difference. So those that are, impaired in the vision or just have a tough time reading really small text, the Charge 5 is probably your better option. Now the Luxe is a stainless steel case, so that could be considered a bit more premium between the two. The Charge 5 is an aluminum case. It feels actually, it feels good. I think it feels almost just as premium. It does have the two ECG and EDA sensors on the side, which is where you put your thumbs now. Gone on both devices are the physical buttons on the side, the capacitive buttons. When we used to have the, Inspire HR, there was still a physical button. And then the Inspire and the Charge 4/Charge 3 moved to capacitive buttons. And now they've pretty much just gotten rid of those, which, spoiler, but I'll talk about it later a little more. I think getting rid of the buttons was actually kind of a good feature. I'll point out in some videos here, but oftentimes when I would bend my wrists a lot, the Inspire 2, it kind of presses on your wrist here and it activates the screen almost incessantly. And when that happens, it makes a vibration, and that can be really annoying when you're doing some workouts or if you're just leaning on something. So I'm actually pretty happy to see those buttons gone. So the weight of the two is actually very similar. I believe the Luxe is about 26.2 and the Charge 5 is 28. So even though it's physically a lot bigger, because it's aluminum and this one's stainless steel, the weights are almost negligible. They almost feel identical on the wrists, minus the thinness. That is a little easier on the wrist, but not a big deal. Now, another physical thing that I actually really like about the Charge is the new strap design. So it kind of goes in here and then it tucks away, which is actually really nice because on my Inspire HR and the Inspire 2 and even the Luxe, the band is like a regular watch band, but the little strap they have to keep that kind of tucked down, I always find that mine rubs off. No matter, even if I insert that thing into the little band, it just always gets loose on me. So I actually really like this new design on the strap of the Charge 5, and hopefully they kind of keep that design going forward through all their straps. But obviously, side note, the straps are interchangeable, so you can get new ones if you want and whatnot. Now, going back to the straps, the actual release mechanism on the Charge is really good. I like it. It's an upgrade from the Charge 4, I think. The Luxe, I actually really don't like this. It's very difficult to get out. You have to press very hard. I feel like it breaks my nail half the time. And then when I'm putting it back in, it doesn't always click. Like, you have to push it really hard to get it to make sure that it stays in. So yeah, interchangeable straps. I'd say the Charge 5 has a better strap mechanism than the, like, look here, I pressed it in super hard and it's still not in. I'll have to finagle that and this kind of makes me nervous that, you see, I just pulled and it popped out. I really wouldn't want that happening when I'm running or doing a sport. So that is kind of annoying. On the plus side, for both of the devices, we now have Corning Gorilla Glass. Now the Inspire and the Charge before it, these were all plastic, I believe, and that caused the devices to sometimes get scuffed. I'd still recommend a screen protector for these. Just like your phone, you know, these things can get scratched. Like, Corning Gorilla Glass is better than plastic, but at the same time, if you're, you know, scraping it against something, who's to say it won't get scratched? I will put a link down below for some of the best screen protector options for these two. So take a look if you want one of those, or if you're interested in that. And also, back to the screens, these both do have AMOLED screens. They're pretty high quality. The pixel density is really nice. You're not going to be able to discern any pixels on the size of these screens, especially the Luxe. But yeah, even the Charge one is really nice. Super viewable in the daylight. I will put a little kind of demo that I did here of the Inspire 2, which has a bright screen mode versus like the, you know, the Luxe or the Charge, and you can see significantly like the brightness is increased. So that's a really welcome addition to these. Not to mention, we also have color screens now, so that's kind of cool to differentiate some of the modes. Like here you can see every time I flip through, it turns a different color for different stats, like your, you know, steps climbed, your heart rate's red, your fuel points, and your distance. I also forgot to mention that both of them have 5 atmospheres of waterproofing, so you can swim, you can run with these, you can dive pretty far, and you don't have to worry about any water ingress. You can shower with it too. Going into the sensors, they both have the optical heart rate trackers, which can keep track of your heart rate all throughout the night, all throughout the day. And then they both have the 3-axis accelerometer, which is used for, movement, as well as when you lift your wrist, the auto wake feature. Also, the auto wake feature, I think, has been finely tuned. It seems to activate less when you do a false movement. So like if you're like lifting a weight or something, it seems to really just activate when I'm putting it in the position that I actually want to see the time. So that's really cool. They also both have the blood oxygenation sensors, the SpO2, and I've talked about that before, but if you're using that for medical purposes, I would not recommend using on these devices. I'll link an article below in the description, but it basically talks about how the fingertip is the best way to measure that. So if you're using it for medical purposes, you're better off buying like a little $20 sensor and not just relying on this for that. But it's kind of a nice feature to have and is more of like a guideline versus actually a medical feature that you should be using. Then they also have a temperature sensor, ambient light sensors, so the variability in the screen dimness can change, and also the vibration motor. So little haptic feedback when either you get a notification or you finish an activity or a timer runs out or something, or an alarm. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Luxe. The actual kind of differences between the two are slim, but there are some noticeable ones. So the Luxe does not have Spotify music control. If that's important to you while you're running, if you don't want to pull your phone, that is something you don't get here. It also doesn't have Fitbit Pay, so that means it has no NFC capability inside of it. And it also does not have inbuilt GPS. So if you're the type that, really likes to use your device as a standalone device, then the Charge 5 is way better for that, because you can, go pay for a drink after your run. During your run, you don't need your phone, you got your GPS tracking or your bike ride or whatever it is you're doing. Still, and I've mentioned this in my previous reviews, I would love to see offline music storage here. Doesn't even need to be that big, but like maybe you can just throw a quick playlist on here, and that would truly make it kind of a standalone device. You could link your Bluetooth earbuds to it, and you wouldn't even need to bring your phone. So that would be awesome. Going back to Luxe, it also does not have floor counting. I don't really use that feature, but if you're someone that does a lot of steps during the day and you want to know those stats, then this does not have that. The Charge 5 does. Also, looking at the sides, you can see on the Luxe that there are no kind of metallic little sensors, and that's for the electrical sensors. I'll get into that when we talk about the Charge 5 more. So those are pretty much the features that the Luxe is missing from the Charge 5. To be clear, there are not really any benefits that you get from the Luxe. It basically just has detracted some features from the Charge 5. I think the Luxe is perhaps a more metrosexual device. It's kind of, in this black configuration I have, it looks very generic, but you can certainly configure it with certain bands, and I know there's even a $200 edition that is kind of a gold linked chain, and that certainly has more feminine appeal to it. Also, it's much slimmer on the wrist, so I know ladies that have smaller wrists, that might be way more appealing. My mom tried out the Charge 5, she's pretty petite, and it just looked gargantuan on her. So I think that's one of the benefits here too. Now let's get into the Charge 5. So it has the all aluminum build I was talking about for the casing. Looks pretty sleek, I think. I really like this new colorway they added. The screen is way bigger and way more usable, I would say, than the Luxe. Granted, for me, these are also just fitness trackers, so I'm not using the screen a lot. I use it more to read some stats here and there, see the time, maybe look at some heart rate stuff, but if I want to see any like detailed stuff, you're going into the app anyways. So the Charge 5 does have 7 days of battery life, whereas the Luxe has 5, and it's just rated a little bit lower. The one thing I will say, this is pretty much exactly the Charge 5 battery, I would say, because it's rated for 7 days as well. With the GPS, I did a test in my Charge 4 video of the GPS drain, and it's pretty significant when you are just using it in GPS alone mode. So just be aware that you will have to charge it if you're using the GPS for like a 2-hour run or a 2-hour bike ride or something. I'm going on a pretty long bike ride today, so I'll post the results of the battery drain just from that bike ride, but it does drain it significantly. So that 7-day mark is going to go out the window if you're using GPS. So pre-ride, we are at 92% battery. So we're at 61% post-ride. And the Luxe has no GPS, it just connects to your phone. So that 5-day battery life estimate is going to be a lot more accurate. Now the Charge 5 does have the 2 sensors on the side, and those are kind of the electrical sensors. It's a ECG and an EDA sensor. The ECG is basically, it takes a 30-second reading, just a little bit long. This one actually can be pretty useful, I think. It can measure like any variabilities in your heart rate, which the optical heart rate sensor does not do normally. That just gets your kind of BPM at the time. And then the EDA sensor, same thing, you put your fingers on here, but for like 3 minutes, which is really long. I feel like if you're not stressed out, you're gonna be stressed out just trying to keep your fingers on this thing. 3 minutes is a really long time to be holding a device kind of on your wrist this small. Might even honestly be easier to just take it off and hold it like that. My personal opinion. But the EDA does measure your stress levels, and it takes, a 3-minute reading gives you kind of a score. I think the higher the better, the lower the worse. I have done some kind of testing on that, and for sure the times I'm more stressed it does read a little lower. I would really like to see some sort of study into the accuracy of that. That would be kind of interesting, I think. I believe only the Charge 5 will give you kind of alerts for variability in heart rate. So if you want more like features and sensors, then the Charge 5 is probably your best bet. The Charge 5 also has quick replies, which might be useful to you. Also, I want to take a quick second. So if you're watching this, I know a lot of the deals are going on right now. The Charge 5, I think you can even get as low as like $130 right now, which is heavily discounted from $180, considering it just came out 2 months ago too. So I'll put a link to that in the description below for those sales if you want. The Luxe retails for $150 and is actually like down to $100 right now. So I'd say it really depends on the time you're seeing this review. If you're watching it and the charge is like $130, then I would definitely say that's the better option and better choice. If you're seeing this at normal times, then the Luxe might be better for you. Maybe a little bit better savings or just cheaper in general. Personally, I think the Inspire 2 kind of spoiled me on battery life. This would get 10 to 12 days for me. So, you know, the Luxe battery life at 5 days feels a little short to me. The 7 days of the charge feels, you know, still pretty good. Last up, I wanted to talk about the chargers. And if you saw my last video, I went into a huge rant. The Inspire HR charger is different than the Inspire 2 charger. The Inspire 2 charger is different than the Charge 4 charger. It's like Fitbit needs to just figure this out. They need to switch to wireless charging or have one little magnetic pin dock like this one that just charges a device. They all have 3 pins on them. There's no reason they should all have different chargers. I've had multiple Fitbit devices break on me, so I was left with spare chargers, and it would have been nice to just have like one in every bag of mine. But that was never an option because they just kept changing it like very subtly. Like all the backs of the devices are very similar. Here's 3 different Inspire lineups. You know, 3 pins, some sensors. Now they have 4 pins and some sensors. But at least there's some promising news. The 2 chargers, the thicker one here is the Charge 5, and this one is the Luxe charger. But if you look at the faces, they're identical, and they work interchangeably on both. So that's really cool. I would obviously like for them to switch to wireless charging, but who knows if that'll happen. But at least now the chargers are the same, they're interchangeable, and that's really cool. So I'm glad that someone at Fitbit is listening to these things. Another thing I was pretty happy to see on the Charge 5 is that they rounded out the design a little here. It's still not the smoothest, but compared to this one that actually has like a sharp, jagged corner, it's definitely better. So I'm pretty happy to see that. My screen woes about the Charge 4 and the Charge 3, which I made a video about, are pretty much gone because they're using an AMOLED and it's a completely new screen now. So that's awesome. Finally, I would say that I can recommend the Charge. If you're looking for something a little more simple, but still with that premium design, I think the Luxe is a good option. It's a little thinner on the wrist, and it's a pretty premium looking device as well. So anyways, I hope that you got some value out of this video and that this comparison was useful for you in deciding on which one you want. Or perhaps, you know, the sales on the older models like the Inspire 2 and the Charge 4 have been pretty crazy. I saw this thing go as low as 50, so that's literally half the price of this. So if you just want like a basic fitness tracker, I highly recommend the Inspire 2. It's still one of my favorites. If you are considering purchasing one of these, the links below are all affiliate links, so that'll kick back to the channel a little bit at no additional cost to you, and that way it would really help build the channel. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.